Welcome back to Voices in Health and Wellness. This is the podcast where we speak with leading minds reshaping how we think about health, care, and connection in the modern world. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Greenland, and today's guest brings a much-needed creative lens to this conversation. Helen James is the founder of Brighton & James, a London-based brand consultancy that's built a reputation for meaningful storytelling and strategic clarity. Her work sits at the crossroads of commercial insight and creative craft, helping brands cut through the noise without losing their soul. In a world where wellness brands are told to stand out, Helen helps them stand for something. So Helen, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Andrew. Hi. I'm a child psychotherapist. And I began training to do this when I was, about 14 years ago now, 15 years ago. Really because I had a child myself that had gone through some mental health struggles and just felt that I could do this better myself, in a sense. And so that then took me on a journey through psychology and ultimately through psychotherapy. And yes, now I have a practice with a colleague based down in Hove, actually. So, yes.
Thank you. And can you perhaps tell us a little about your work at Brighton & James and what led you to launch it? I mean, if you can tell us a little bit about your backstory, but I think it's an interesting journey and an interesting pivot. So perhaps you could tell us a bit more about it.
Of course. It was really a colleague and I had been working together many years elsewhere, and we felt that actually Brighton and Hove in itself didn't have a specific child and adolescent psychotherapy service. Everything was geared around adults, and there are so many children and young people, including students. We've got 3 universities here, I think now. So it just felt like a really underserved area. I'd lived in the area for, 20 years, and just felt that there was a big gap. And so colleague and I decided to launch a practice in 2024, April of 2024. So yes, that's how we opened there.
And how has it evolved since you opened your doors back in 2024? What's the kind of journey been like?
It was daunting to take that leap, obviously, to start with, really daunting. We actually began with clients very quickly. It was quite fortunate. I guess that kind of my market research in the area and realizing how many children and young people there were held true. So we did begin to build up a caseload. We are now a year on, and we've just opened a second room, and we're looking to open a third shortly, hopefully in the new year. So we're building slowly and steadily. I always think this is one of those careers where you kind of don't want to be busy, because obviously that means that there's a huge need out there. So it's bittersweet, I guess. But so far, there's no end to the client referrals that are coming in.
And what does your work look like day to day? Probably there is no typical day in this world, but what is the general pattern of things?
Yeah, general pattern of things. I have a private practice based at my own home. So I do 2 days here, which is where I am now, and then 2 days in the office at Brighton & James. I think when I was asked what I wanted to do at school, I just said I don't want to do the same thing every day. And I think I've definitely achieved that. I never know never mind day to day, from hour to hour, what's going to enter the room next. Because obviously even clients can have crises, things can come up, things can change, very, very quickly. So, from hour to hour, everything can change.
So I guess you're leading a bit of a double life. That's not meant to be derogatory, but if you do different things, I mean, how do you balance that out? And because I do a similar thing in my world. I'm doing lots of different things, wearing lots of different hats. Just curious to know how you kind of keep things siloed, separated, and balanced out.
I think that comes from the training. We're trained really well. I trained at Terapia in London, and it was a really tough course. And it prepared us for most things, I think, and especially how to differentiate, kind of separate out one aspect of your work from another. Obviously, we hold ourselves as therapists, we hold quite difficult material at times. And then we go home to our own children and families. And there's an aspect of that training to hold that, but also to be able to put it down at the end of the day that I apply to both jobs, both hats, as you say. I lead a bit of a double life.
And do you have a leaning more to one than the other, or are you very balanced in the different things that you do?
No, Cormac and James is my baby, and always will be, I think. It's been really exciting to take what we've done on a small scale elsewhere into Brighton. And I guess that's where my real passion lies. Ultimately, Ross and I have lots of plans for the business, lots of things on the back burners for future, but yeah.
And what are you seeing in terms of client expectations? We've been through a fairly big turmoil in the last 5 years, what with the pandemic. Has that affected what you're seeing in terms of what's showing up, and how have you kind of embraced that?
No, absolutely. That has had a huge impact on in the client group that we see, obviously, as teenagers, and the sort of 15, 17-year-olds that we're seeing now were at 11, 12 during the pandemic. So I think that there's a lot more anxiety prevalent. I think we see anxiety continually most days. It's phenomenally prevalent in that particular age group, and I think we're seeing a huge rise, which is changing largely due to the pandemic and the way that threw our young people back into the house with their parents at a time when they're meant to be developing their own individual lives and heading out there to be more with friends, more with school, developing their identities. So we do have a lot of kids now that are struggling to do that, to make that separation, because they were stuck at home for those years.
Do you think we'll ever be completely over the pandemic based on what you've just said and the fact that we're still seeing the aftermath of that now? When will we finally be able to say, yeah, we've got everything that we needed from the pandemic, we've learned everything we need to lead, everybody's recovered and better, let's move on?
Yeah, who knows? Wouldn't it be lovely to say that is completely in the past and and now and then consigned to the history books? I guess the answer is that more children and young people are coming forward. Therapy is more accessible than it's ever been, more socially acceptable as well. So I kind of take hope, I would guess, in the aspect of that means that more young people are coming forward to explore those experiences and will hopefully then recover in that aspect and go out and continue with their developmental stages as they would have done had the pandemic not happened.
Perhaps you remember telling us a little bit about the brand storytelling and communication, because obviously that's something, this is your part of your double life, and I just wondered how that might have been influenced by your work as a child psychotherapist.
I think the key, whether that's different for other businesses, I mean, obviously the client is at the core of what we do, and the ability for us to connect with our clients is paramount. So the kind of storytelling, the social media, all of that comes into it. It's about promoting who we are as people almost as much as our skill set, because if a client can't connect with us as a person, then the therapy is likely going to go nowhere, because there needs to be that trust, that genuine kind of feeling between us, myself and the client, the child, in order for the therapy to even begin. So it's a big process. It's a long process sometimes.
And in terms of the kind of advice that you give to the clients that you're working with to improve the way that they connect with their audiences, can you give us some examples of practical things that you get them to try and do?
With clients? I guess be authentic about who you are. Find your voice to actually who's behind the brand, who's behind that. For Ross and I, it was really important that we present ourselves as real people. So that's the sort of genuine authenticity, I would say, is the key.
And there's lots of noise, there's lots of social media noise, there's lots of noise in the media in general. Do you have a sense of what wellness brands misunderstand about people and that they're getting wrong in the way that they communicate and put content out?
Oh, gosh, that's a difficult one. Again, I think it comes down to knowing your audience, really knowing what that person wants from you. And for us, it's always to be, able to be genuine, down to earth, we're not experts as such. I mean, we may have the knowledge, but that's not how we position ourselves as experts. So yeah, I guess if I had any advice, it would be that, find your audience and be authentic.
I mean, are you aware of any sort of damaging narratives that you think are unhelpful in this space, in sort of wellness, education, people's mental health in general, things that kind of prick your ears up and set the red flags and the bells ringing in your mind?
I don't think so at the moment. Nothing that particularly comes to mind. I guess the narrative around therapy, that it can be, something that's quick and easy to do. That narrative, I think, damages, us as a practice, because it's not easy. It's one of the hardest things you'll ever do. And if you're going to do it properly, it's really hard. So I guess the narrative that it can be a quick fix is, thoroughly unhelpful for us.
And you mentioned the quick fix. And is there anything else about the way mental health is communicated to parents and children that you'd like to change or see done better? It's really difficult to be honest about that without feeling like I'm criticizing. I guess for me, the model of the sort of 6-12 sessions of therapy, I find really, I'd like to say, confusing, really. I think it doesn't work like that. For me, it would take 5 or 6 sessions to even begin to get to know that child or young person. So I kind of start from 6 weeks in. So where you have models that finish at 6 weeks, for me, that makes no sense, even at 12. In order to make therapy stick, as it were, then you would have a long lead in, getting to know the child, getting them to trust you, and then naturally a sort of slow closing out. You don't end abruptly either. So those models of therapy for me are pretty inadequate. Let's stick with that. Okay. And what are the kind of the challenges in the work that you do? Because you're basically a clinician, you're a business owner. What are some of the challenges in doing this kind of work? I think the difference between being the business owner and the clinician, that's quite complex to wear those two hats. Because obviously one is facts, figures and numbers and accountancy and spreadsheets, and the other is very much the human connection. You don't generally get into this business because you're obsessed with, facts, figures and numbers. So I think a lot of us as therapists can struggle a little with that side of it, promoting ourselves, pushing ourselves out there, because what we really want to do is be in the room with the child, the client. So that's tough. That's definitely a growing edge for us. And in terms of the clinical work at the moment, is there anything that is a particular challenge in the day-to-day of delivering this kind of care? I think the crises around mental health care generally I've never known it this bad. It makes our work really difficult, because sometimes we'll see clients that literally cannot afford to continue, and we know that there's nowhere to send them. That's incredibly difficult. The waiting list, for CAMHS for the past few years have been insurmountable. I mean, and the lead-in times for diagnoses for autism and ADHD, anything along those lines, is just inordinately long. There are also complexities around shared care between parents. Will think they're doing the right thing by going to a private psychiatrist to get a diagnosis, and will then discover that a lot of the NHS sometimes will not accept that diagnosis. Schools might not accept that diagnosis. So then you're back to square one, and you're faced with a 3-year, list for CAMHS. So it can be incredibly complex at times. With all those constraints and stressors, how do you and your colleagues look after yourselves in this work? Because it is very demanding, and I suppose there's always that risk of transference. So how do you kind of look after yourselves?
I think it's about making sure that you have time for yourself. Wellness for me, you can probably see my studio's in the garden. So being out in nature for me is huge, very grounding and very important to reconnect with that side. Anything mindful, yoga, meditation. I've meditated on and off through my life. So I reach for those tools. And obviously getting enough sleep, taking supplements, whatever I can do to support myself, and being with friends, having connections myself with people that aren't about work. Yeah.
So you've been doing this work for a little while now in both camps. If you could wave a magic wand and change something tomorrow, what would that be?
Without a doubt, CAMHS waiting lists. Absolutely. I think being able to, when you're a parent and you come to us or a service like us, you've got a child, you're normally at a stage when you're pretty desperate. You finally reached out for help or managed to fund sessions for your child. And without that backup from CAMHS for the children that, can't continue with us or are waiting for diagnoses, as we said, which is not something we do. We can offer guidance, but we don't diagnose ourselves. So yeah, that would be what I'd reserve my magic wand for, I think, if it wasn't for just curing mental health full stop, of course.
Of course. And if you were to start all over again tomorrow with everything that you know and the journey that you've been on, would you do anything differently at all?
Oh, would I do anything differently? I think I'd probably have made the jump a bit sooner, set up on my own a bit sooner. And I'd have probably jumped onto social media and things like that a lot quicker. That's been something I myself have been a little behind the curve on. Luckily, I have a teenager in my life who, catches me up. But marketing, branding, that kind of thing, we've pretty much learned as we go on. So it would be good to have had a lot more knowledge of that before we began, I think.
And finally, where are you looking to take things over the next 6 to 12 months? What are your plans in both camps, the psychotherapy side, the branding side? What would you like to be doing?
Psychotherapy side, more training so that we can, provide more tailored support to more children. Extend into our third room, which is another plan. And business-wise, I myself want to get into more of, speaking, writing, that aspect of my life, which was what I did before this, really. So kind of a sort of circle around. Otherwise, just keep continuing what we're doing and hopefully keep the momentum that we've got and be able to support more children and young people as they come through our doors.
If you had a surge of new clients next week, would that work or would something break? Hopefully not you. What would happen if you had a massive surge coming in?
The risk is that it would be us that would break. I think Ross and I both are now advanced enough, as it were, in our careers that we're well aware of roughly how many clients we can hold without breaking. A surge of clients would not be good news, and obviously in the grand scheme of things. So I would hope that we would be able to manage that list, prioritize, triage, and then we're back into making decisions about young people's mental health, which is something I'd love to never have to do. I'd like to be able to always provide what they need and always have somewhere to refer to. That would be the dream.
And on that note, Helen, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, talking about your work in both the branding side of things and the child psychotherapy side. It's been a very interesting conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you.